Well, thank you, Marlon, for your warm welcome. And I'm delighted to be here. And hello to everyone joining us online for this important discussion. From the islands of Palawan in the Philippines to the Gola forest of Sierra Leone, communities have bravely used the law to take on the companies and investors who pollute their environment and destroy their forests. The efforts of communities advocating for their own land and environmental justice keep us all safer.
Thank you very much.
Despite the importance of this critical work, however, land and environmental justice defenders face huge obstacles to justice, especially from those who want to maintain the status quo. In this session, we will explore how governments, businesses, and advocates can support grassroots environmental justice efforts that are critical to the fight against climate change. We'll focus on 4 topics: enshrining the rights of communities for community decision-making in law, trusting community monitoring and ground truthing, protecting the defenders, and investing in environmentally harmed or vulnerable communities. We'll touch on how each of these elements is key for communities to be able to use the rule of law to protect the environment. We'll hear about experiences from the government of Sierra Leone, the Environmental Legal Assistance Center, ELAC, in the Philippines, Prodesk in Mexico, and the Legal Empowerment Fund. I'm delighted to be joined today by Jobo Samba of the government of Sierra Leone, Gertie Mayo Enda, Environmental Legal Assistance Center, ELAC, Gabriel Gustavo Roca Belloni of Prodesk, and Atieno Odiamo Ambo of the Legal Empowerment Fund. You can read their full biographies on the conference platform. Later in the day, we'll break into subgroups to discuss what has worked on the 4 key areas that I've mentioned. So let's begin. An important component that enables communities to protect their land is a legal right to have a say in the development that happens on their land. In Sierra Leone, the Parliament is currently deliberating on proposed legislation that affords communities the right to consent over any development on the land that they own or use. So Jobo Samba, the head of the National Land Policy and Voluntary Guidelines Implementation Secretariat at Sierra Leone's Ministry of Lands, Housing and Country Planning, has led the development of the National Land Commission and Customary Land Rights Bills. So Jobo, can you give us a brief description, a brief background about the Land Rights Bill and explain the key components of the bill, especially on the role of communities in decision-making? Over to you.
Thank you very much, ma'am, for giving me the floor to provide a brief background on the work we have been doing on the current legislations that is in Parliament right now for ratification. But before I go ahead, I want to express our sincere thanks to the organizers of this program. I also want to say thanks to our partners, our development partners like the FAO, the World Bank, who have been supporting the government of Sierra Leone in this effort. I also want to quickly say thanks to the CSOs who have been also supporting government in this initiative, like Namati, Green Scenery, we have Land for Life. We want to say thanks to them for supporting the government of Sierra Leone, excuse me. So the 2 bills we have talked about, which is the National Land Commission and Customary Land Right Bill, stem from the piloting the implementation of the National Land Policy, which was approved in November 2015. We started, the National Land Policy actually provides for legal reforms that includes review of existing laws and also designing of new laws, to meet the current trend of land administration and governance, and basically to provide and look for ways to include communities in decision making and then in the management of natural resources in this country. So in order to bring these recommendations into effect, the government of Sierra Leone in 2019 commenced the process to develop the Customary Land Rights Bill and the National Land Commission Bill. These bills are actually designed to bring into legal effect the recommendations enshrined into the National Land 2015 National Land Policy. So the process of developing the bills have been really very inclusive and participatory. That includes using a multi-stakeholder approach where development partners, CSOs, excuse me, government institutions were all involved in the development process. So for the Customary Land Rights Bill, it is basically designed to protect customary land rights, eliminate discrimination in the management and administration of customary land rights, position the land under customary tenure for responsible investment, and generally provide guide on how we will manage land under customary tenure, management and administration of land under customary tenure. The National Land Commission also is to establish bodies that will be responsible for the management and administration of land in the country. It's also designed to decentralize land administration, to decentralize and make land administration and management in the country participatory and inclusive. So the National Land Commission, specifically involving communities and other stakeholders in the management and administration of land in this country, now provides for the setting up of the District Land Commission, the Chiefdom Land Committee, and a Village Area Land Committee. So at chiefdom level, at a district level, the District Land Commission will be responsible and playing a role at district level for land administration. While at chiefdom level, a Chiefdom Land Committee will be established, and the Chiefdom Land Committee will include communities, which will include the paramount chief, who will serve as head of the Chiefdom Land Committee, and then you will have land-owning families coming from different parts of the chiefdom to be part of the Chiefdom Land Committee, and then also land-owning families, people who own land, and also it provides for people who do not own land but who use land to also participate in the Chiefdom Land Committee. So the Chiefdom Land Committee will now be responsible for the management, headed by the paramount chief, will be responsible for the management and administration of land at the chiefdom level. And then, the same applies to the Village Area Land Committee, where in the village, the town chief or the head of the town will be the head of the Village Area Land Committee, and the Village Area Land Committee will comprise of land users and landowners in the community. And interestingly, and more importantly, this bill provides that 30% of the composition of the Village Area Land Committee and this committee should be women. So essentially, this is the effort, this is the work the government of Sierra Leone has done to make sure that communities are involved in decision making as it relates to land management and administration in the country. I thank you very much. Over to you.
Okay, thank you. Just a couple of questions. Do you expect the bill to be passed soon? And what challenges do you see for the bill's approval through the Parliament?
the government is highly motivated to pass the bill, and it will pass soon. The ministry envision that this process is something we will complete this June. The bill will pass this June. And then because the government is highly motivated to position land for responsible investment, but also we vision this bill to be providing the conducive environment and the foundation for revenue generation and support to government efforts. So essentially, we believe that we are motivated to pass the bill in this month, June. Before it ends, the bill should be passed. And then one of the challenge we do envisage in the process, excuse me, we have completed all of the inclusive consultative process that included all stakeholders. We are now moving to the parliamentary processes. This is where we do envisage that, because land is really very sensitive and the interest in land is really very high. So we still believe that at the parliamentary level, there will still be people who will want to also, bring in their own personal opinion into what the ministry have proposed. But however, the good news is that the ministry will be there, and the ministry understands and have a position for all of the provisions in the bills. So we'll be there to ensure that the bill is intact, and it is left in a way that it will achieve the goals and aims of what we are thinking in terms of tenure governance in this country. Thank you very much. Over to you.
Good, Jobo. Thank you for giving us an example of how a national government can give power to communities that are on the front lines of this land and environmental justice work. Let's turn now to our colleagues from ELAC and Prodesk, two civil society organizations that work closely with grassroots communities that are most impacted by the effects of climate change. And I'll first ask Jyoti Mayo-Anda about community monitoring of environmental impacts. We know that governments are widely under-resourced in monitoring corporate compliance with environmental regulations. In many cases, official monitoring of corporate impacts is inefficient and reports come out far too late. Communities have done their own monitoring of environmental impacts and brought evidence to corporate and administrative authorities. So, Jyoti, can you tell us about the work of ELAC and its partner communities in the area of monitoring environmental impacts? What's the importance of communities' involvement in monitoring and evidence gathering? Over to you.
Good evening, Ma'am Mary, Marlon, and all our colleagues from the MATI and all our friends from all over the world. For more than 20 years in interacting with local communities as part of our legal empowerment work, we have seen how they have been frustrated by, example, the encroachment into the ancestral domains of extractive and destructive projects which have not undergone appropriate environmental impact assessments or free and prior-informed consent processes and consultations. And communities therefore want to be actively involved in identifying the gaps in the enforcement of the laws. They want to secure photographs of the violations, the destruction to their forests, their ancestral domains, their marine protected areas. And in the process, ELAC therefore, in working with them, has designed capacity building activities on documentation, evidence gathering, and we design these trainings. We confer with them and we do workshops. And in the process of actually doing these workshops, trainings, and doing role plays to document and gather evidence, we have seen how important it has been that evidence from the communities play a critical role in being able to convince an administrative agency that indeed this corporate entity has breached environmental laws, or that this entity or corporation has encroached into the forest area or marine protected areas of ancestral territories. So documentation is part of our case build-up, whether it is administrative cases or civil or criminal cases. They are important. Photographs, petitions, certified 2 copies of government documents are being secured. In the process, communities also need to understand that when you do monitoring and you gather evidence, it has to relate to a specific law, which are being violated, or law or laws which are being violated, because it's not easy to understand, example, the environmental impact assessment process, the role in consultation, in multipartite monitoring teams. It's also not easy to take stock of, forestry violations, or fishery violations, or even land laws. So the process of capacity building is really very important, and it takes time to be able to do this. Now, the importance of why they have to be involved, because they are key witnesses, they're on the ground, and we also want to make sure that the effort of monitoring the state of the natural resources and the environment becomes sustained. They can work with village officials, with municipal officials, with civil society, with conservation groups. But I need to emphasize, we have seen that when communities, indigenous peoples, farmers, fisherfolk, women, young people really get involved and they scrutinize the activities, the laws violated, then it's clearer. It becomes convincing to the agencies involved. And when they go to court, they actually reveal a lot of the narratives, the stories that have not been heard. Finally, I'd also like to emphasize that the gathering of all this important information, they need to be sustained, because monitoring efforts are also cost centers. And therefore, government also has to invest and make sure that local people get involved in the process. Thank you.
Thank you, Gertie, for those important points. I'm now going to ask Gabriel Gustavo Roca Belloni to talk about the work of Prodesk. In many countries, especially in Latin America, land and environmental defenders face constant threats to continue their work. Many defenders have been killed, as I know well, and one of the key programs of Prodesk is its community security program, helping communities safeguard their collective safety and security. So Gabriel, what is Prodesk doing under this program? Over to you.
Gracias. En primer lugar, muchas gracias por la invitación y por la oportunidad de estar en este espacio, especialmente a los servicios de interpretación que hacen este diálogo posible. Voy a iniciar hablando un poco acerca de la labor que hacemos en Prodesk. Prodesk, o el Proyecto de Derechos Económicos, Sociales y Culturales. Somos una organización de derechos humanos feminista que fue fundada hace ya más de 15 años por nuestra actual directora ejecutiva, Alejandra Ancheita. Desde Prodesk trabajamos con pueblos indígenas, comunidades agrarias, así como colectivos y colectivas de trabajadores en trabajos precarios. La labor de Prodesk se enfoca en la promoción, pero también la exigibilidad de los derechos económicos, sociales y culturales de comunidades y colectivos vulnerables. En este proceso y en esta experiencia de más de 15 años, hemos identificado, como bien se mencionó, que el ejercicio de defensa de derechos humanos, sobre todo en contextos como el mexicano y en América Latina, acarrea riesgos para las y los defensores de estos derechos. Durante nuestra historia, Prodesk ha buscado, ¿no?, atender o ha buscado exigir la implementación de mecanismos estatales de protección para la defensa y la protección de estos defensores y defensoras, que incluyen aspectos como las medidas cautelares y los mecanismos de protección estatal. Sin embargo, al poco tiempo nos dimos cuenta que las opciones o las medidas otorgadas por el Estado para salvaguardar la seguridad de las personas no eran suficientes y que había que empezar un trabajo de fortalecimiento y de reflexión con las comunidades y con los colectivos para tratar de identificar cómo estas personas se sienten seguros y se sientan seguros en su territorio, pero también para fortalecer las prácticas tradicionales y ancestrales que tienen las comunidades y los colectivos. Nos hemos dado cuenta que en contextos en los que las comunidades y colectivos se ven enfrentadas a riesgos que no son solamente del Estado, pero también de empresas transnacionales y capital transnacionales, las medidas estatales no son suficientes para garantizar la seguridad. En este sentido, en Prodesk hemos impulsado varias iniciativas para promover nuestra propuesta que llamamos de seguridad comunitaria. En primer lugar, hemos elaborado manuales sobre seguridad comunitaria, los cuales pueden acceder en nuestra página de internet y puedo también compartir en el chat de esta presentación. Al mismo tiempo, desde Prodesk, trabajamos directamente con las comunidades y colectivos que nosotros asesoramos o acompañamos legalmente para identificar cuáles son los mecanismos propios de seguridad que las comunidades tienen y cómo podemos fortalecerlas de manera sistemática. Al mismo tiempo, realizamos ejercicios de formación a través de los cuales, por medio de una plataforma virtual y sesiones presenciales, fortalecemos las capacidades de organizaciones y comunidades que defienden la tierra del territorio para fortalecer sus mecanismos propios de seguridad. Esto implica asesoramiento para la elaboración de protocolos y planes de seguridad. Y finalmente, desde Prodesk, también impulsamos algo que llamamos la Red Latinoamericana de Seguridad Comunitaria, que es una red que está conformada por 30 organizaciones de 7 países de América Latina, quienes nos reunimos una vez al año en la Ciudad de México para desarrollar análisis de contexto acerca del estado actual del derecho a defender derechos humanos de América Latina, pero también para compartir experiencias y buenas prácticas en materia de seguridad comunitaria y protección colectiva, que tiene como centro las necesidades, pero también las capacidades de las comunidades y de los colectivos con los que trabajamos. Muchas gracias.
Thank you, both Gabrielle and Jersey, for highlighting the importance of close partnerships between civil society organizations, especially legal empowerment groups and grassroots communities. Indeed, these partnerships are essential to support the work of communities in defending their land and environment, and of course, in safeguarding themselves. And that brings us to our next topic. Capacity building initiatives for communities require financial resources. Communities need financial resources and technical expertise to continue their work of protecting their land and natural resources. Innovative pooled funds like the Legal Empowerment Fund could make a big difference to getting resources to these frontline advocates. So I'm going to call now on Atieno Odiambo to tell us about the Legal Empowerment Fund. Atieno, what is the Legal Empowerment Fund and how does it support the work of land and environmental justice defenders? Over to you.
Thank you very much, Mary. And I apologize for showing up late. I had a bit of technical issues, something I always encounter in Kenya. I was surprised to find that I have the same technical issues here at The Hague. Thanks for that question. So the Legal Empowerment Fund is a fund that was launched in September last year, and it's a 10-year multi-million-dollar program of the Fund for Global Human Rights. And our aim is to provide resources to frontline activists and grassroots groups in order to close the global justice gap. The fund was created with the support of a constellation of funders and allies, including the Mott Foundation, the Hewlett Foundation, NAMATI, the International Development Research Center, IDRC, and Pathfinders for Peaceful, Just, and Inclusive Societies. And really the goal of the fund was to strengthen grassroots justice groups and also to help communities access the law and secure justice. I'll this can easily become a monologue. So I'll just try and make sure that I'm not boring all of you stiff with vision, mission. But I wanted to at least talk about what our vision is, which is to narrow the global justice gap by helping marginalized communities through the provision of resources to achieve legal agency to protect and secure their rights. And you think, as you all know, that legal empowerment is the belief that grassroots legal actors in marginalized communities are best suited to drive lasting social change. However, as we know, these groups are severely underfunded and accessing resources can become very cumbersome. And so the answer to this was the creation of the Legal Empowerment Fund, which is also seeking to relocate the power of grant making closer to the people that it most affects. We seek to provide local grassroots groups with renewable core funding, which should be able to enable them to address inadequate legal protections. We'll also fund frontline legal empowerment work, regardless of whether the groups self-identify as legal empowerment organizations. So for example, you could have women working on a group working on women's rights, or a group working on indigenous people's rights. And really, they don't identify as doing legal empowerment work, but the work they are doing is considered legal empowerment. And so we're looking for and looking to fund groups that both self-identify as legal empowerment and for those who also don't identify as legal empowerment entities. And one of our main goals is to make sure that we strengthen and institutionalize grassroots organizations so that 10 years later, they're much stronger. And they are not just reacting to all the incoming requests for legal assistance that they get, but we're also trying to enable them to build a stronger legal infrastructure to bring about systemic change. Because from the ODI report, and a report done by ODI several years ago, and shows that there's a growing body of evidence that demonstrates that legal empowerment offers the potential to deliver scaled up systemic change, including through community mobilization, strategic litigation, and as long as these change mechanisms are driven by the community. Now, I'd say that legal empowerment also democratizes and disrupts the way in which the law is practiced. And this makes it much closer to the people and gives them more agency. And when they do have agency, that is when they are able to hold public institutions and public officials accountable. I would say that, for the longest time, we've seen a lot of funding, and I was actually just at the plenary session, lots of funding goes to organizations doing top-down legal work, so strengthening institutions, strengthening government bodies, but it's really not enough. And I can't say this, I think at some point at this forum, I think I've said it so many times, not enough funding is going to grassroots organizations. And really, we have to make sure that in order to achieve the SDG 16+ by 2030, yes, you must fund and you must strengthen institutions, but also institutions and organizations and communities working from at the grassroots levels also need to be funded. As I had mentioned before, the Legal Empowerment Fund is a program of the Fund for Global Human Rights, which is an organization that was founded in 2002 and has been funding frontline human rights organizations who are doing grassroots work in very difficult situations. And the Fund for Global Human Rights has a very wonderful way of getting money in a nimble fashion, very fast, to grassroots organizations in very difficult to reach places. In addition to providing resources, LEF also intends to create structures and methods for learning. So we're also integrating learning into our operations so that we can best understand how to support effective legal empowerment work and see what makes these efforts successful. And we hope that by the time we have gathered all this knowledge, we'll be able to share it with civil society and with donors and governments in order to help them inform efforts to tackle the pervasive injustice more effectively. I think one of the most important aspects of the LEF, the Legal Empowerment Fund, is the fact that we engage in participatory grant making. And this is whereby the decision power about the funding, including the strategies we're using, the criteria behind those decisions, is shared with the very communities that we aim to serve. And we believe that the participatory grant-making process provides the opportunity to transform the vertical relationship between donors and recipients, and also to promote leadership among practitioners in the field. So we plan to engage in 3 types of grant making to support legal empowerment and grassroots groups. First is the open call with no thematic or geographic focus, which is to provide an accessible resource. And this is a very useful way for us to reach thousands of legal empowerment groups across a wide range of geographies focused on different justice issues. Secondly, we're going to have focused grant making, and this is where we will focus on a particular geographic area or thematic area of focus. And this is especially the issue of land, environmental, and climate justice has really risen to the top for us, and I think that is definitely an area that we will be funding more in the future. We had a call for proposals in January, and a large number, I would say disproportionately, issues on gender justice as well as land and environmental justice rose to the top. So there are lots of groups globally who are working on these issues, and that is, we plan to provide targeted funding in those areas. We'll also be providing learning grants so that we can share and we can strengthen the sharing practice. And so in addition to our learning agenda, which will be working in coordination and complementing the work that NAMATI and the IDRC doing, it's important for us to also provide groups with the resources to put learning into practice, to experiment, to innovate, and then to document and share the experiences with us. When it comes to supporting land and environmental justice, several things come to mind for me. I feel like if you want to make a difference in communities that are most affected and impacted by the effects of climate change, we have to listen to these communities, and we have to let them lead, and we have to allow them to be the architects of the solutions. And this is a core premise and tenet of the Legal Empowerment Fund. What we seek to do is support visionary activists who are developing community-based solutions to environmental issues, and to build foundations of and to help them build the foundations for sustainable future. I feel like land and environmental justice defenders use a wide array of methods which are not quote unquote mainstream. And so, for example, in climate justice, if you look at climate justice within the realm of customary and informal justice systems, it really is a fact that these are systems and actors within these systems, especially indigenous people and local communities, are very important to the governance and management of land and other natural resources in much of the world. However, the mainstream approaches that have been relied on to secure and protect their lands have been mostly national and international laws, and not taking into account the customary laws that they have been using for decades, centuries, to protect and sustain their lands. So from a legal empowerment perspective, the customary knowledge vis-a-vis land tenure, land rights, gives indigenous people and local communities the agency, and also empowers them to transform the laws affecting their lands. I also want to talk about the fact that the land and environment and climate justice sector can be very siloed. And I say this, I think essentially most of the justice sectors I find are very siloed, and people are working in, not on an intersectional level, and there's no cross-pollination of ideas. And yet, when you look at issues, whether it's climate, gender, it's cross-cutting. It's not just in one particular area. So the LEF is focused on field building, and we plan to encourage engagement in this cross-movement and intersectional realm, because without environmental justice, we can't achieve economic, health, social, or racial justice. But I also think it's important to break down and demystify or simplify the language of environmental and climate change. Before COP26, I have a neighbor, a good friend and a neighbor who works for a big organization, a resource organization. And I asked her before COP26 in Glasgow, I said, she was heading to Glasgow for 2 weeks. And I said to her, so what is at stake at COP26? What should I be talking about with grassroots organizations? and with community groups who are involved in climate, land, and environmental justice. And she pointed me to some published documents that were summaries of the COP26 agenda. And she said, you know, those particular documents will give you a very good idea of what it is we're going to discuss and the outcomes that we are seeking. So I read through this document several times, and later, maybe 4 or 5 times, and I went back to her and I said, you know, I need a PhD to even begin to understand what these documents are purporting to say. So my question to her, therefore, was how do we then expect, you know, to make a difference in environmental, land, and climate justice when, you know, we don't understand the language, and this language is inaccessible to indigenous and local communities who are the very stewards of the natural resources we are seeking to protect. So in that realm, you know, the Legal Empowerment Fund, you know, will seek to work with organizations and seek to bring this language and these ideas and the laws of the land and the environmental justice discourse much closer to the people. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Atieno, and thank you in particular for your passion for supporting grassroots communities and getting resources to them. This, as you know, is a working session. Working session 5 is about building multi-stakeholder partnerships for change. And we've heard examples of partnerships for land and environmental justice in 4 areas: in institutionalizing communities' roles in decision-making in government policies, in community monitoring of environmental impacts, and thirdly, in securing communities that are defending land and environment, and fourthly, in providing financial support to legal empowerment groups and frontline communities. So a warm thanks to you, Jobo, Jerti, Gabrielle, and Atieno for sharing your very rich experiences and for the very good work that you're doing, and I hope will continue to do. So now we will hear from you, our participants, and I call on Marlon Manuel of Namati to explain how we will do the discussion in the breakout groups. Marlon.
Thank you very much, Mary, and we are honored again to have you and to have a climate justice champion with us today. Thank you very much. So now we will go to our the second part of our discussion. By the way, if you have questions for our speakers, you can use the chat box to type your to send your questions. We will have a final plenary later after our breakout session. And now we will go into 4 groups. So we will be having 4 groups. The first group will be on security. The second group will be on community monitoring. And then we have a group on enshrining the rights for community decision making in law. So and then finally on financing, on funding. So you will see the 4 breakout rooms open, and then we will allow participants to join whichever topic you want. And in the breakout room, we want the participants to discuss the following questions. Number 1 is just to share your own experiences about what has worked in that particular area. So if you are in the area of security, so please share your own programs, your own experiences of enhancing the capacity of communities to safeguard their members and the community collectively against threats. And then second, we also want to ask, how can we unite? How can we work together across geographies to make these types of successful actions more common? And how would you, in particular, how would you or your organization like to participate in that movement? So I will ask my colleagues to open the breakout rooms. We will have, for this, we will have 15 minutes. Those who will require translation, we will request you to remain in the main room, and we will continue our discussion in the main room for those who will require translations, because we will not have translations in the breakout room. So after 15 minutes, we will all go back to the plenary room for our final plenary session. And if you have questions, then we will have time to address those questions later. Okay, so now you can see the 4 breakout rooms. So you just click join, just click the topic that you want to be part of. So 1 is security, 2 is community monitoring, 3 is enshrining rights for community in law, and then 4th is funding. And then we will request our speakers. Jobo will be joining the group 3. Gabriel will be joining group 1. Jurti will be joining group 2. And Atieno will be in group 4, funding. So please choose your group. If you're having some difficulties joining the breakout room, just send a message through the chat. Let us know which group you want to join, and then we will bring you to the breakout room.
Marlon, why don't I stay? I'm going to move you to a breakout room and stay in this room because I can't, since I opened the breakout rooms, move.
Okay. Would you like to switch? You can transfer the hosting.
I don't think I can transfer the breakout rooming.
Okay. Okay. So I will join. Okay. I will join.
I'm going to move you to group 1.
Okay. That's right. With Zaza.
Yes. Thank you. So hello and welcome. We have a few people remaining in this room. And why don't you introduce yourself if you're in the main room? And we have the ability to continue to use interpreters. So please go ahead and introduce yourself. And in this main room, we can talk about all of those topics. Is there anyone in the main room that would like to introduce themselves?
Hi, sorry, I couldn't speak because I was in the main room. So yeah. So I didn't know. Yeah. Well, my name is Perzan Singo. I'm a student. I'm studying international relations, and I'm interested in socioeconomic development. Yeah.
Thank you so much for joining us, Perzan. I see a few other people in the main room as well. And I know we have in addition to the interpreters, Anybody else like to introduce themselves to get us started?
Yes, I'm the organizer, so that's why I was not joining any breakout room, but my name is Ana Maria Montoya. I'm the Director of Data Analytics at the WGP.
Welcome, Anna. Thank you. See if we have anybody else who wants to say hello. Perazim, I would be interested to hear if you had any of the topics from that were discussed, if any of them jump out at you from your experience in learning, or that you are most interested in.
Yeah, I found it quite, because I felt like it was really wholesome, because you look at the different things. You look at like what the national government is doing in Sierra Leone, and then also considering the community as well, like indigenous communities and local communities. And I found it interesting, especially about looking at the grassroots level and like trying to support the grassroots level, and also like acknowledging that it also needs financing. Like it can't just happen just by itself. People need like funding and things like that. So I found that really interesting. And also the financing, I guess, is also really important, like in developing countries where you might want to do something, but then you need the funding for it. So yeah, for me, it was really interesting. As like a student, it was really interesting. Yeah.
Indeed, there's a lot of different parts of that fit together. I mean, Anna, I know that you are helping organize, but I wonder too if there were parts of that jumped out from you from a data and analytics perspective.
Yes, well, I am actually, my PhD dissertation was about compliance with judicial decisions that were protecting property rights in Colombia as part of the land restitution process. So I am very familiar with all these, not only with the peasant route, as we call, like for the individual cases of displaced families during the war, but also for indigenous and Black communities. And I'm very happy to be in this session, and there is a lot of things that has resonated with me and with what I have observed. I do think that even though we have the legal instruments to encourage like communities to fight for their rights, we still need to like do more for them, as the justice from Kenya was saying, they being their own architects of solutions. And this is what I think the states are not doing well. We create all these laws and all these institutions, but we really don't have these mechanisms to strengthen their participation and their autonomy on how to rule these institutional matters. So yeah, there is a lot of things to be done in this matter.
That sounds like a fascinating dissertation. I would love to hear more.
Thanks.
So, President, as well, I wonder, one of those areas that they talked about was more about community monitoring, and so that kind of links, I think, to what you were mentioning, and Ana Maria, about how to make that work. I don't know if either of you have come across more examples of that working really well, and ways that courts or others have really taken on what community as good evidence in that process.
Well, I think the first step, of course, are the legal frameworks. In Latin America and Colombia, as Gabriel was also saying, there is like a wide legal instruments like consultas previas, for example, which is the previous consultations that indigenous and Black communities, they need to give to any project, right? So that's the minimum standard, but there is a huge gap between the law and the compliance and the enforcement of those laws. So that's why I do think that we really need more resources, and we need more international community like overseeing all these compliance and enforcement of all these laws, because otherwise, of course, the power, the economic power of mining enterprises at the very positive note, but also the power from illegal groups are the ones that are undermining all these enforcement of laws. So at the end, is a fight between the law and the actual enforcement. And if we don't have the international community overseeing that, is really unlikely that these communities will win the fight. In the experience with Colombia, I do think that the international community has been very helpful through their aid programs, USAID, the European Union, and that could be a good way. And of course, the journalists fighting for that and showing that to the world are also very important to help for that enforcement.
Hello, Karel, who just joined. Just wanted to let you know that we are in breakout rooms right now. And in this main room, we are talking, we are doing a general breakout as the other rooms have gone into specific topics. And in this room, we are able to still have interpretation. I don't want to put you on the spot as you've joined in Zoom in a second, but if you'd like to introduce yourself either in the chat or come off mute, we are a small group and you're welcome to do so.
Thank you. Just one moment, I will get back to you.
No problem. We'll give you a minute in a second. President, I don't know if what Ana Maria shared brought anything to mind for you.
Okay, I haven't really I don't specialize like international law or like its implementation, but I guess there is a gap, you know, like there is a gap because it's one thing to write something on paper, another thing to actually make it happen. And then there are always going to be like, okay, if we talk about like on the national level, there's always going to be like different interests. So I also attended like a session. It was about accountability. It was about accountability and also like giving citizens the right to access information from government. So it talked about how so like 90% of countries have that kind of, you know, like request to access information from the government. But then in Africa, it's only, and I come from Zimbabwe, so that was relevant. It's only like 25 countries out of like 54 countries, 66%. So like there's this problem. Like, so like for example, Uganda will say, okay, you're allowed to like request information from the government, but then the implementation of the regulation of how to make that actually happen is only like, I don't know, released like 5 years later, or like, and then they also gave an example of Kenya where they did the implementation in I think 2016, and still now they don't even know how to regulate that. So like I agree with what she said. Yeah.
Absolutely. Well, so our second question, we only have a few minutes left, but I'd be curious if either of you have thoughts on this about how knowing this is also an international problem, right? And there's some global systems involved in this. What are the ways that you could envision uniting across geographies to address this? Because it's a common problem we're seeing in so many different places. We're really interested in what a global movement to address these really grassroots implementation issues would look like.
Well, I'm not an expert in social movements, but I do think that the legal mobilization and all, like I'm sure, like I think you will be more able to answer that question and give us insights on that. Like, but I think the legal mobilization and the empowerment that international organizations, nonprofits can like do for these social movements to interconnect and to elevate their demands to international courts will be the key to help them not only be more visible, but also to coordinate for global solutions, either to pass a new law or international principles in the UN or something that also not only define the rights, but also define the mechanisms to enforce those rights, because I think that is the next step. Like we need to do more for the enforcement stage. But yeah, I'm curious about what you think. What is your experience? Like, yeah, I'm sure like you have a lot of legal strategies, and I would love to hear as well.
Yeah, it's interesting. So we're in the process of kind of trying to figure this out, right? About what a global movement looks like, because there are so many global environmental justice groups, or movements right now, but many of them don't really include impacted communities in that conversation. There's kind of a gap between that. And we're interested in seeing if there are ways to cut across language and geography to really be able to have communities themselves be part of that story. And it's logistically difficult because of language and geography. But yeah, that's something that we're interested in, trying to tap into that potential power across those places. And also bring youth into that. So I think actually of the global environmental justice movements, the youth movement is more aware of local impacts than some of the other more seasoned groups. And so it might be that there's a way to bring the youth movement into that. President, I don't know if you had any thoughts on this as well.
Okay, it's also going to be very arbitrary because I'm not like 100% into this. Yeah, I guess it's difficult to like, yeah, to make it like a global thing where everybody kind of plays a role. There's also power play as well. So like you have, you know, the global north and also the global south. So how do you interact in such a way that it doesn't feel like the global north is imposing stuff from the global south? And like I think there have been like proposals like, okay, like democracy, for example. I think Kofi Annan talked about how democracy is like a universal principle, something that should be applied all across like different countries and stuff like that. And yet it still feels like it's something that only belongs to the West, or only belongs to like the USA, or I don't know, like France or something. So I think maybe like showing how it's relevant for each context and each different country, so that, and also obviously it's going to be implemented in different ways for different localities, I guess. So I guess finding that general applicability maybe is important, and something, it doesn't also feel elitist, like oh, justice, you know, it's for the big guys, and it feels like something that's applicable for everybody. And then maybe that could also, you know, help to kind of create everybody to kind of join in the movement for justice. Yeah, that's my humble opinion.
That's fantastic. So the other groups are going to come back in just a second. So prepare us for that. But also, if either of you is interested in reporting back, just let me know in the chat. Otherwise, I'll try to sum us up a bit. But thank you so much.
Okay, so we're all back. Okay. So this is our final plenary session, and we'll start by just having a quick sharing of what had been discussed, some key takeaways from the discussions in a group. I'll start with what we have discussed in group one, group on security, and we were discussing the value of activities on security, security mechanisms. And I find it very interesting what Gabriel was saying, that in Mexico, communities they already have their protective mechanisms in place. Not so much for political threats, but maybe for ordinary, criminal threats. So communities already have their own security protective measures. They don't see it as a strategy, as a collective strategy to secure themselves. So what Prodesk is doing is to work with communities and to be intentional and deliberate in ensuring that they are, number one, prioritizing risks to them in relation to their being defenders, to their being human rights defenders. And at also focusing their protective mechanisms that they already have in place, and this time becoming more strategic and more focused on the priority issues that they have, and so that strengthens the community. One other point that was mentioned in our conversation, Gabriel said, when you strengthen the capacity of the community or an organization to secure itself and to secure the members, that in itself strengthens the community and the organization in general. So I think that's one great thought that we had from the group. Can we hear from Group 2? Group 2 is on community monitoring.
We're a group of 4, and Nayan and Asia and Tintin can add. But my own takeaway was that to be able to, community monitoring is important, but we answered more the second question on how can successful efforts become common. And the suggestion was we can build our own local organizations and strengthen what we have, and then link it up with a global movement. And then there was a suggestion of enabling local communities themselves from the ground having exchanges, because there's a value among, example, indigenous peoples talking to each other, not only legal empowerment groups, but the communities themselves having an exchange. So that, example, the communities from Africa and communities from Mexico or the Philippines, something that I think can benefit them, and then the movement, in a sense, comes from the ground. Thank you.
Thank you, Jerty. That's Group 2. So we now go to Group 3. This is Jobo's group, enshrining the rights for community decision-making in law, in government policy. Anybody from that group, Group 3, who would like to share? Abby.
I can share since I took the notes. People in our group, it was a very geographically diverse group, experiences from Brazil, Albania, Sierra Leone, and myself in the United States, outlined how complicated it was to pull together a variety, like a vast diversity of perspectives, to get representatives from every community and try and find consensus, because there are opinions across the spectrum, and that takes time, and that takes it's an involved process that starts from the local level and goes to the national level, and in the end, inevitably, not everyone is satisfied. But at least you sometimes end up with a situation that is better than before, and then you work with that. And there was discussion how there were 2 stages. One stage is actually getting something enshrined, the rights enshrined in law or policy, but then the other challenge is implementing that law or policy, and that in itself is very important and cannot be overlooked, and that involves broad sensitization and working with communities. So basically the takeaway that is that you can't take for granted, it's not just like a public input and commenting process, that there is intense investment that has to be put into the process, and that it's complicated by the fact that ecosystems span national borders, and so to be very impactful, there's a continuing challenge of coordinating, as in the case in Brazil, the rainforest is the Amazon, goes to Colombia, Peru, multiple countries, trying to figure out how to work transnationally. We didn't quite get to the second question. There's not much time. And also Frank Terry Happy from Albania was cut off in the middle of his contribution. I'd love if he could share some of his experience in the chat if possible. It's not a lot of time, but was rich for what it was.
Thank you. Thank you, Abby, and thank you for Group 3. Let's hear from Group 4. Group 4 is the group on funding. That's Atieno's group. Anyone from that group who would like to share some key takeaways? Akila?
Sure, yeah, this is Akila with Namati and the Legal Empowerment Network. So I can share a couple just to start us off and then hope others will add. But we, started off talking about the problem rather than what worked. But I think, just because funding remains such a challenge, and when we talk about legal empowerment and legal support, it's still hard to find organizations that are investing in the grassroots, and still more funding tends to go to institutions and more top-down approaches. And, Rafa from the Kayan Feminist Organization shared some of the challenges that she experiences in her legal empowerment work, working with, women and girls on issues of gender violence as well. In terms of what has worked, we talked about a couple things, looking at, other sectors, ministries of land, ministries of women, and sort of taking a more intersectional approach to securing funding for grassroots group, moving beyond sort of the justice sector, sharing knowledge and learnings among groups about what works, and then collaboration and using partnerships and leveraging spaces like the Open Government Partnership, the OGP, to try and secure government commitments to financing, though of course, moving beyond commitments to actual implementation is challenging. And then of course, the Legal Empowerment Fund is a new model of financing, which hopefully works. And we'd love to revisit that after the first round of funding and, see how grassroots organizations have experienced receiving funds through the LEF, which I think is a new model of ensuring that grassroots groups get core funding for their work. We didn't get to talk very much about part 2, but we did talk about how we need to spread the word about the opportunity for funding through the LEF, and think about how the Legal Empowerment Fund can leverage some of the information that it's been gathering, the knowledge through this first round of funding to really secure more funding for grassroots groups and engage in further advocacy around that. So if I may have missed anything, please feel free to add others in the group.
Thank you, Akila. Okay, we have a few more minutes remaining for us, and we will devote this to some questions from our attendees. And I will start by asking Gabrielle and Jyoti. And please, for our attendees, please feel free to type your questions while I'm throwing this question to Gabrielle and Jyoti. How important is the role of legal empowerment groups like ELAC in the Philippines and Prodesk in Mexico in working with communities to strengthen their capacities as land and environmental justice defenders?
I can start,
Okay,
Gabrielle.
Jyoti.
Okay, thank you, Marlon. The guidance that we can provide in the process that we also learn from them actually is an important process of capacity building. This means knowledge, acquiring knowledge, skills, and also the attitude. Because getting to know the law and monitoring the implementation is not easy, especially if you want to gather evidence. You want to become a paralegal, a monitoring person or enforcer. They realize that laws that we have are only as good as their implementation. So therefore, the being watchdogs or monitors, in a sense, are very important. And then lastly, whatever that they do, the legal empowerment work can also lead to advocacy work, if there's policy reform needed, plus strategic litigation, and also governance work, because we engage with government agencies or government officials in the process when we have the documentation in place, or the communities themselves participate in local government bodies. So they provide important inputs in this process. Plus, I think last point, planning. Planning is also a tedious activity, tedious process that also needs time. So capacity building and proper attitudes would be needed there. Thank you.
Thank you, Jyoti. Gabriel?
Sí, claro. Nosotras desde Prodesk trabajamos bajo algo que llamamos la metodología de defensa integral. Y eso implica reconocer que la defensa de los derechos humanos, sobre todo cuando trabajas con comunidades y con colectivos, tiene que ir mucho más allá que las acciones de litigio, que las acciones legales. Debido al tipo de procesos que llevamos desde Prodesk, que son casos de litigio estratégico que duran 5, 6, 7, 8 años, consideramos que el fortalecimiento de las comunidades y de los colectivos es la única manera de cómo una comunidad puede mantener un ejercicio de defensa de sus derechos en un tribunal de justicia. Consideramos que promover el reconocimiento de estas personas no como sujetos, no como objetos, sino como sujetos de derechos, trabajar con estas personas para promover que ellas se autorreconozcan como defensores de derechos humanos, que además asuman un proceso de formación y capacitación en materia de esos derechos, pero al mismo tiempo de construcción y generación de alianzas con otras organizaciones, otras comunidades u otros colectivos que están haciendo una labor similar. Es realmente la única manera de mantener una comunidad o un colectivo interesado y activo en un proceso de exigibilidad de justicia que, como ya mencioné, puede durar muchísimos años. Algo que además creo que es sumamente importante cuando hablamos del fortalecimiento de las comunidades es reconocer el rol fundamental que tienen las mujeres, sobre todo en los procesos de defensa de la tierra y del territorio, particularmente cuando hablamos en el ejercicio de las colectividades, pero también la importancia de constantemente estar promoviendo la inclusión de gente joven, de niños, niñas, adolescentes y jóvenes en estos procesos de defensa, toda vez que el relevo generacional, la posibilidad de que estas batallas, estos esfuerzos de las personas que hoy en día están en procesos de liderazgo pueda ser retomado por nuevas generaciones y esto pueda permitir que los procesos de defensa puedan perdurar y puedan seguir a lo largo del tiempo. Entonces, el fortalecimiento de la capacidad comunitaria, la construcción de poder colectivo es la única manera de sostener un ejercicio de defensa de derechos humanos.
Gracias, Gabriel. Any questions from our participants? You may unmute your mic if you want, or you can type your questions in the chat. Or you can also choose to answer the question that we did not have time to answer during the breakout, which is how can we unite together across countries and regions to address the challenges facing us.
I would like to add something I think it's obvious and everyone know, but maybe we can use this opportunity that we now, at least I and Kayan know more organizations that they based on the grassroots and do grassroots legal empowerment. From my experience, one of the things that women and youth in the ground really find as very powerful for them, like to share experiences also, and it gives the people hope. Like if, for example, other minorities or women from other minorities in the world, like success, they can share their successes about achievements or processes that they are doing in terms of legal empowerment and achieving their rights. It could be very powerful for women because we face a lot of challenges and sometimes, disappointments, especially when there is political crisis and occupation and ongoing discrimination in the political level, as the situation in Israel-Palestine. So it could be really good opportunity, and I invite any one of you like that we can collaborate in the future and do kind of webinars or sharing like successes and stories and represent it to the public and ensure that women from the grassroots, like from the paralegal groups, or that they participate in the process of the legal empowerment, they can also take part of that, and not just we, the people that work on the organization. So this one thing that I see it as a workable and not related funding, and it could open also, you know, opportunities and ideas for us.
Definitely. Thank you. Thank you, Rafa. Purvi.
Thanks, Marlon. Just to pick up on the question that you were flagging, how do we work together? And then also echoing something that Rafa was saying about sort of sharing and you know, collective exchange. I just wanted to put a plug for a learning agenda for legal empowerment. So the Legal Empowerment Network, as you know, there's hundreds of organizations around the world, thousands. And as we look at the kind of next 5 to 10 years, it's clear that there are some questions that are burning and at the frontier of practice. And I think some of the ones that we're talking about here, like how do you build collective power? How do you, in this context of like repression and closing civic spaces, like how are we keeping ourselves safe? How are we keeping communities safe? Financing, all of these are just like burning questions at the front of everybody's mind. And so the learning agenda is this collective initiative that we're launching very soon. And over the next 5 to 10 years, we want to foster, exactly what Rafa was saying, the kind of as we're experimenting, as we're learning in our own context, let's share that with each other. Let's capture that systematically. The contexts are often very different, but there is tremendous value in being able to talk to each other and share strategies. And what works and what doesn't work. And so just wanted to put that on everyone's radar, that's coming up. And hopefully that can provide a space and some structure for us to be having these conversations in a systematic way and not sort of reinventing the wheel for what are clearly burning questions on all of our minds.
Thank you, Purvi. Any other questions or answers to that remaining question? If there are no other questions, I will give the final. I'll give the final minutes to our speakers. But before that, just to note that this is one of many conversations, series of conversations that we'll be having. Definitely, we are identifying key areas that we can focus on together. And we started today with a session with 4 key areas on security, community monitoring, institutionalizing community power in decision-making in laws and government policies, and financing in support of grassroots communities. In the next few weeks or months, we will continue to engage in conversations in these 4 areas, and trying to grapple with that challenge of how we can work together and we can link up with each other across different countries and regions to work together on these on having learning from each other, collective learning, and also working together on certain key issues, and especially building on the community, on the power of the community. On the part of NAMATI and the Legal Empowerment Network, we have, since last year, we have engaged a few organizations. Many of you are in that conversation to identify priorities, key priority issues, and to collectively develop a common agenda that we can work on in the next few years as a strategic plan for the group and broadening the conversation to engage more organizations, more communities in many countries on the conversation and on the collective action that we'll be engaging in. So I will any final announcements? If none, I will give the floor to Jerty, Gabriel, Jobo, and Atiana for any final messages. Short messages. Jerty first.
My own message is to express my gratitude to all our colleagues. We should continue the conversation. I could imagine that the time's short to be able to share more. As we say in the Philippines, mabuhay.
Thank you, Jerty.
Atieno here. I just wanted to say thank you very much for inviting me to this panel, and it was great to hear from grassroots organizations, Gabriel and Gertie, who are working in the trenches, and I'd really like to hear more about your experiences and how the LEF can, support your work. And in the same line as Gertie said, I will say in Swahili, asanteni sana, kwaheri.
Thank you, Atieno. Gabriel?
I'm going to give my final words in English. I just want to sort of recap something that I think Rafa said. And I deal with security for human rights offenders. However, I do and I value the importance of remaining hopeful at the end of the day. And I think there are reasons to be hopeful. And I think we need to start every day thinking about that. Even though we might not see it, but there are reasons to keep on doing this work. So I just want to share that with everyone. And I'm also going to share a few words in Spanish. Muchísimas gracias a todos y todas por este excelente trabajo. Los llevo en el corazón y en el alma. Un fuerte abrazo.
Gracias, Gabriel. I'm looking for Jobo. Jobo, are you still around? Okay, I don't think Jobo is here. So you would like to thank again our speakers, Jerty, Gabriel, Atieno, and Jobo, and of course Mary, who had to run to prepare for the plenary, for the final plenary session here at the World Justice Forum. So on behalf of NAMATI, the Legal Empowerment Network, ELAC, Prodesk, the Legal Empowerment Fund, and the government of Sierra Leone, represented by Jobo Samba. We thank you, everyone, for joining us, and we will reach out to you, and we will keep in touch because there are many other questions that remain unanswered. And we hope that we can continue looking for answers and working together to find solutions and to work on the solutions. Thank you. Thank you very much. Good afternoon.